Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at this keynote highlight talk, which continues the conversation that we started yesterday with Dr. Ruby's talk about U.S. perspective on CTBTO. Now we'll get to hear the perspective of Corey Hinderstein in her role as Deputy Administrator for the Defense Nuclear Nonproliferation at the National Nuclear Security Administration. There, she leads NNSA's efforts to prevent state and non-state actors from developing nuclear weapons or acquiring weapons-usable nuclear or radiological materials, equipment, technology, or expertise. This role builds on her past experiences at NNSA and at the Nuclear Threat Initiative, and some of you know her already from her past presidency of INMM. Today, we'll have her give some remarks, but please think about questions because we will be saving time for you to come forward with questions at the end. But with that, Corey, thank you so much.
Thank you, Megan. It's really a pleasure to be here in Vienna at SnT2023 to talk about U.S. actions in support of our commitments to the nonproliferation and disarmament goals of the NPT and the CTBT. Yesterday, NNSA Administrator Ruby spoke about the importance of the CTBT to the United States and described some specific areas where NNSA is supporting the CTBTO PrepCom and the U.S. nuclear explosion testing moratorium. My hope is that you will learn even more about our support for international nuclear explosion monitoring and verification at the many U.S. talks, posters, and displays this week. But today, I'll expand on the administrator's remarks to discuss more examples of U.S. transparency and verification. As a responsible nuclear power, we work hard to be transparent about our activities in the U.S. nuclear security enterprise, from nuclear nonproliferation research and development all the way to the dismantlement and disposition of nuclear weapons and materials. One key point to understand is the significant reduction in the U.S. nuclear weapons stockpile of 88% from its peak, and the importance of a strong international commitment against nuclear explosive testing. We do not need and do not plan to conduct nuclear explosive tests. The United States continues to observe its nuclear explosive testing moratorium as part of our commitment to the letter and the spirit of the CTBT, and calls on all states possessing nuclear weapons to declare or maintain a moratorium on nuclear explosive testing. I'd like to start my substantive remarks with a number of examples of how the United States supports the important work of the CTBTO Preparatory Commission and the Provisional Technical Secretariat. The United States is the largest contributor among signatory states, and we also fund the operation, maintenance, and recapitalization of 36 U.S. International Monitoring System stations. In addition, the United States government, through NNSA and the Departments of State and Defense, fund U.S. experts to assist the PTS and advance the state-of-the-art in nuclear explosion monitoring and verification. All told, this amounts to well over $50 million annually that directly benefits the international effort. We are proud of several additional projects that are enhancing the PTS mission, such as Xenon International, which was recently accepted for use by the IMS. Xenon International significantly improves radio xenon collection and analysis systems deployed in the IMS, collecting larger air samples and reducing processing time. It allows us to detect lower levels of radio xenon more quickly, giving scientists more accurate clues about the potential source of a suspect nuclear explosion. We expect the first Xenon International unit to be fielded in the IMS next year. Other U.S. activities address the challenge of distinguishing emissions from the production of life-saving nuclear pharmaceuticals from signals that could indicate a nuclear explosion. One of those is the Workshop on Signals of Man-Made Isotope Production, or WASMIP, one of my favorite acronyms. Even through the COVID pandemic, we hosted WASMIP virtually to bring together scientists from two very different communities to discuss ways to maintain robust and effective nuclear explosion detection and monitoring networks. Our last workshop was in June 2022 in Stockholm, Sweden, and I hope many of you will consider joining us in Santiago, Chile in December of 2023. A related project is the source term analysis of xenon, or STACs, where the United States provides fission-based medical isotope producers with state-of-the-art STAC monitors to record radioxenon emissions. That can help distinguish harmless emissions from an unexpected spike that may result from a nuclear explosive test. We have so far installed STAC monitors in 6 facilities, including 2 in the United States, and we have plans for many more. I'd also like to commend Belgium's National Institute of Radioelements. They not only installed a US-supplied STAC monitor in 2017, but they recently converted their medical isotope production facility to use low-enriched uranium for their targets, instead of the more proliferation-sensitive, highly enriched uranium. As a result, now all major global molybdenum-99 production facilities use LEU targets. The International Data Center Re-engineering Project is another major project with significant US contributions. The IDC's waveform data processing system benefits from continuous modernization, and the United States has so far provided the IDC with 4 major software updates. We owe a collective thank you to the Air Force Technical Applications Center, AFTAC, who have allowed upgrades to the US National Data Center to be leveraged for the benefit of the IDC. Sandia National Laboratories conducts IMS component evaluation at the Facility for Acceptance, Calibration, and Testing, or the FACT site, through a contract directly with the PTS. This is a unique capability in a remote and quiet location in New Mexico that allows traceable testing of very precise components and systems, resulting in deployment of a more reliable and robust seismic and infrasound equipment set in the IMS. The PTS has another contract with Idaho National Laboratory to provide radioxenon standards, or precise quantities of radioxenon gas, to help calibrate instruments and evaluate CTBT radionuclide laboratories during proficiency test exercises. Pacific Northwest National Laboratory operates one of the radionuclide laboratories that accept particulate and gas samples of high interest from IMS stations for detailed analysis. RL-16 at PNNL has consistently received outstanding ratings from the PTS for its work. In 2015, then NNSA Administrator Frank Klotz spoke at SnT15, where he responded to the PTS's request for help with more realistic on-site inspection training by allowing CTBT OSI training at the former Nevada test site, now the Nevada National Security Site. As you can imagine, it was a huge undertaking to support CTBT OSI training at an NNSA site. But in May of 2016, less than a year after our offer, we hosted 41 surrogate inspector trainees and PTS staff from 32 countries in Nevada. In October 2017, we hosted visual observation and radionuclide sampling training in Nevada for trainees and PTS staff from 39 countries. The United States also played a large role in the success of the integrated field exercise in 2014, and we're engaged and excited to provide support for IFE-25. In collaboration with the PTS, NNSA sponsors workshops to expand the use of the Regional Seismic Travel Time, or RSTT model, and help developing national data centers improve their ability to protect infrastructure against earthquakes while preserving IDC capabilities. The last RSTT workshop was in Nepal in November of 2022. The NNSA Seismic Cooperation Program collaborates with the PTS to engage regional counterparts to build seismic monitoring capability with a focus on the Caucasus, Central Asia, the Middle East, and North Africa. The United States supports 3 Working Group B task leaders and the Radionuclide Expert Group chair. We believe in the key role that state signatories play in the work of the PTS through bodies like Working Group B. There are too many NNSA experts here to name them all, but I do want to call out one of our best. Many of you know Dr. Harry Miley, a laboratory fellow at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. His work for over 35 years in nuclear explosion monitoring and verification has set the standard for excellence. He was a co-developer of one of the mainstay technologies in the IMS, the Radionuclide Aerosol Sampler Analyzer, or RASA. He led the radionuclide portion of the inspection team at the 2014 Integrated Field Exercise in Jordan. Dr. Miley was a key figure in PNNL's understanding of radioactive releases from Fukushima in 2011. He's stepping back from full-time work soon after SnT2023, but has promised us he'll be around to consult. Harry, please stand and be recognized for your outstanding contributions. I encourage you to seek out Dr. Miley and the team of NNSA experts here this week to learn more about these and other projects that support the CTBT. I'd now like to turn to some examples of U.S. transparency related to activities at our nuclear security enterprise sites, such as the Nevada National Security Site and the national laboratories. As a responsible nuclear state, we see it as our obligation to be transparent about our activities within the nuclear security enterprise, including underground. These activities can counter suspicion and uncertainty about our activities and misinformation or misunderstandings about what we do and why we do it. We've hosted Dr. Floyd and his predecessors at many DOE sites to see our activities. Most recently, I was proud to host Dr. Floyd along with senior U.S. interagency representatives at Los Alamos and Sandia National Laboratories, as well as the Nevada National Security Site. We took Dr. Floyd almost 1,000 feet underground in Nevada to see the subcritical experiment zero room, and also some enhancements we're making at the U1A complex to allow us to continue to maintain the U.S. stockpile without nuclear explosive testing. I will speak more about subcritical experiments in a moment. In October 2016, we were pleased to host Dr. Zerbo and a distinguished group of international diplomats in Nevada. Along with UNVI and Dr. Floyd, we are well underway with planning for a similar visit to Nevada and New Mexico in November of this year. We also host international disarmament and nonproliferation officials at NNSA sites to highlight how the U.S. government is actively supporting the NPT. In July 2022, prior to the 10th NPT Review Conference, we welcomed 10 observers from around the world to Sandia and Los Alamos National Laboratories to demonstrate our commitment to global nonproliferation and a safe, secure nuclear stockpile without nuclear explosive testing. We are also transparent about our nuclear policy and policy objectives. Every year, the NNSA publishes a stockpile stewardship and management plan and releases it to the public. The most recent plan, published in April, describes in great detail NNSA's efforts to implement the United States' 2022 nuclear posture review by maintaining the safe, secure, reliable, and effective nuclear weapons stockpile without nuclear testing, as well as revitalizing the nuclear security enterprise's infrastructure and scientific capabilities. To quote the NPR, the United States supports the CTBT and is committed to working to achieve its entry into force, recognizing the significant challenges that lie ahead in reaching this goal, end quote. These documents, along with a highly detailed budget justification and public remarks, give the public and the international community significant transparency into our activities. Another component of the Stockpile Stewardship Program is subcritical experimentation. As you may have heard Administrator Ruby mention yesterday, we are exploring multiple opportunities to provide further transparency into our subcritical experiments program. These experiments, permitted by the CTBT, help us maintain the U.S. stockpile without nuclear explosive testing. These experiments are specifically designed so that no self-sustaining nuclear fission chain reaction can occur, making them consistent with the CTBT. Nevada National Security Site is the primary location where experiments with radioactive and other high-hazard materials are conducted, and the only location where high-explosive-driven plutonium experiments can be conducted. We have executed 33 subcritical experiments since 1992, when we performed the last U.S. nuclear explosive test, and we have plans for 2 subcritical experiments in fiscal year 24. We are open with the public and the international community about our plans for subcritical experiments. But NNSA also supports 2 defense nuclear nonproliferation programs which use the data from field experiments conducted at the Nevada National Security Site test beds to validate nuclear explosion monitoring models, algorithms, and sensors. A multi-year field experiment at one of the NNSS tunnels is underway, consisting of subsurface chemical explosions and other surrogates to understand how low-yield nuclear explosive test signatures are propagated. And second, a multi-year field experiment to directly compare shallow-depth earthquake and explosion signatures, which is just starting construction at NNSS. This work will directly contribute to the work of CTBT and the broader international community. For large non-nuclear explosions at the NNSS, NNSA practices transparency by notifying the PTS in advance of high explosive experiments so they can be sure the relevant IMS stations are operating to detect seismic signals. This was most recently done in September 2020 for a series of explosive tests designed to validate the main high explosive charge for future experiments. The next high explosive experiment is planned to take place in late 2023. In addition, NNSA makes datasets and scientific publications available to the public after conducting these experiments. Here, the most recent example is the 2021 report releasing the data for experiments that took place from 2018 through 2019 in Nevada. I also want to take on what may be an uncomfortable subject. While we have no intention of returning to nuclear explosive testing, it would be remiss of me to give this talk and not acknowledge that we do have presidential direction to maintain the readiness to conduct a nuclear explosive test. To be clear, test readiness requirements have existed across multiple administrations and doesn't change the fact that the United States has no plans to conduct a nuclear explosive test. Let me end my remarks on transparency with this. In December 2022, a team at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory's National Ignition Facility conducted the first controlled fusion experiment in history to reach the milestone of fusion ignition, which produced more energy from fusion than the laser energy used to drive it. This experimental result at the National Ignition Facility opens the door to an unprecedented capability to gain new understanding for our stockpile stewardship, but also provides insight into the prospects for clean fusion energy. Achievement of ignition will lead to laboratory experiments that help NNSA maintain confidence without nuclear explosive tests. In the words of Secretary of Energy Granholm, quote, "This is a landmark achievement for the researchers and staff at the National Ignition Facility who have dedicated their careers to seeing fusion ignition become a reality. And this milestone will undoubtedly spark even more discovery. The Biden-Harris administration is committed to supporting our world-class scientists like the team at NIF, whose work will help us solve humanity's most complex and pressing problems, like providing clean energy by providing clean power to combat climate change and maintaining a nuclear deterrent without nuclear testing." On a personal note, before I finish, I'd like to recognize Dr. Floyd and the CTBTO Preparatory Commission's efforts on diversity and inclusion. As part of his commitment, I know that Dr. Floyd became an international gender champion in 2021, and he looks for opportunities to attract people from all over the world with a view to ensuring the highest standards of professional expertise, experience, efficiency, competency, and integrity. At NNSA, I lead our office's Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility initiative within Defense Nuclear Nonproliferation, where we aim to recruit, develop, and retain the very best talent, recognizing that some groups have been historically underrepresented in the nonproliferation, disarmament, and arms control fields. Many of the NNSA participants in the SnT2023 are female, including the NNSA administrator and myself, and we encourage many early and mid-career experts to attend and present this week. In closing, I hope I've been able to demonstrate the deep commitment of the United States to the nonproliferation and disarmament goals of the NPT and the CTBT, going beyond the core tenets of the CTBT by not only maintaining the U.S. stockpile as long as it exists without nuclear explosive testing, but by being transparent about our ongoing and planned activities and providing strong support to the PTS. We provide unprecedented insight into our work and welcome the international community to see how we do business. We hope other responsible nuclear powers will follow our lead. And with that, I thank Dr. Floyd and the SnT2023 organizers for the opportunity to be with you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that wonderful overview of the ongoing activities and the many ways that the U.S. has provided direct and significant support to CTBTO. I'm sure some of you were listening to that and had some questions, so I would encourage you to go ahead and come up to these microphones. I see a hand over there. There's a microphone right behind you, if you could go to that for your question.
Thank you very much for this nice presentation. I have two questions. What the role of subcritical studies for the computer simulation models that you are developing, specifically for tuning or defining more precisely the different scenarios that the computer are using? This is my first question. The second is related with the El Capitan, the supercomputer that will be deployed in this year, that according to the information, the designers can use this to manufacture new nuclear weapons. And how these new nuclear weapons will, what threats will represent this nuclear weapon for the objectives of the CTBT, CTBTO, and also for the non-proliferation treaty. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your questions. I very much appreciate them. I'm going to answer both while recognizing that I'm not in the nuclear weapons program. I'm from the non-proliferation side of our house, and so for more detailed answers, you may want to talk to others from NNSA, but I'll do my best to talk in general terms in answer to your question. The first one is about the role of subcritical experiments. Fundamentally, the role of subcritical experiments has two functions. One is to look at effects of plutonium aging, because we also have been adhering not just to a moratorium on nuclear explosive testing, but also a moratorium on the production of fissile material for nuclear weapons. All of the plutonium in the stockpile is that which was produced decades ago, right? And so one of the roles is to look at plutonium aging and the effects of that over time. The other element is for multiphysics codes. And so I think that when you think about the codes and the validation of the codes through first the history of nuclear explosive testing, of course, but also recognizing that that there is more data to be gained. So my understanding of the subcritical experiment campaign is for those two areas of technical inquiry. With regard to El Capitan, and here I'll just speak more broadly about supercomputing within the NNSA complex, the supercomputing capability of the complex is actually brought to bear on a number of really challenging challenges and future opportunities. So the supercomputing capability of NNSA is looking at everything from climate modeling and looking at climate change, contributing to development of nuclear energy, and our nuclear nonproliferation assessments, including looking at signatures of proliferant activity related to fissile material, weaponization, et cetera, nuclear security, and our long-term R&D. We also are able to use the supercomputing capability for a number of things related to biological threat reduction and biosecurity. And so I think, if there's one point I want to make, it's that the supercomputers support a very broad base of capabilities within the complex. When it comes to the role of El Capitan or any other supercomputing for nuclear weapons, the one thing I can say is that we are committed to using the data that we have historically, and that's why we don't need to conduct any additional nuclear explosive tests. And that is indicated in the fact that we have gone down in our nuclear weapons, not just in numbers, but in types and in variability, so that we can rely on information we already have, as opposed to trying to introduce new information in the stockpile.
Thank you for those clear answers. Do we have some additional questions? Go ahead.
Thank you very much for a very eloquent presentation. The question is linkage between the subcritical testing and the big project of modernization of nuclear weapons, and how they are coordinating with each other, what your institute is going for this purpose. And after all, at the end of the day, we are concerned about, of course, we appreciate the declaration yesterday and today, which is very transparent. You will not give up the test. This is it, which is, of course, in the contradiction with the spirit and letter of the CTBT. But however, technically, would you explain what will happen? Because at the end of the day, we are concerned that with the modernization, going to nuclear, low-yield nuclear weapons, therefore the world is concerned still. No matter what, there is a tour here and there where subcritical, in fact, tests you are doing, which we appreciate, of course. Everybody wants interest, these kind of tours. But at the end of the day, something which is concerned is what we are going to go and where U.S. going. Whether that moratorium, how much we can count on that moratorium. And at the end of the day, of course, the other nuclear weapon states are concerned, and they will follow suit. This is a concern, more concern. And I hope that you will take steps. The others will do the same, and all nuclear weapon states will unanimously follow their obligation under Article 6 of NPT. And of course, the spirit and letter of CTBT, although you have not ratified yet, but I'm sure that you're committed because you are a signatory anyway. Thank you very much for your explanation.
Thank you again for your remarks. And I just want to say I understand and respect the questions that you raised. I think that there are a couple of points I could make in return. One is that I think you're right. The subcritical test or subcritical experimental campaign is part of our stockpile stewardship and management program. And we do intend to continue as long as we need additional information. But the key thing here is that while we do that campaign, it is specifically so that we don't do nuclear explosive testing, right? Yield producing testing. And so while I understand the concern about how this might play into future nuclear weapons, we have been very clear that this is about answering questions about our existing stockpile. And what we are intending through all of these activities, the tours, yes, are one piece, but one thing that I've said is it's not enough to just do a tour. You can't just take somebody someplace and tell them what they're seeing. You have to allow an engagement, a back and forth, allow questions, be transparent about answers. And one of the ways to demonstrate that we are not conducting experiments that produce any yield is by taking people directly to those locations, which of course you never would do if we were doing yield producing tests there. Instead, these are non-yield producing, no fission yield experiments. And I also think that it is our assessment, consistent with the statements that have been made from the beginning of the CTBT, that these subcritical experiments are consistent with the commitments that we made. And you're right, we absolutely remain committed to the treaty, even pending its entry into force. And finally, I would say that we also are, as I noted, committed to the NPT and committed to Article 6. And we remain, through all of our discussions, looking towards a world without nuclear weapons. But we do have a responsibility until we not just get to that world, but actually help move us towards that world, that we do have another responsibility to the maintenance of the existing nuclear weapons, and we will continue to do that.
All right. Unfortunately, I'm being told that we are negative 27 seconds. Would you like to have any last closing remark, Corey?
No, I don't think so, but I just very much appreciate the organizers of SNT, Dr. Floyd, all of the senior leadership of CTBTO for giving us an opportunity to speak and the opportunity to hear these important comments and questions. And I look forward to further interactions with people, with participants here, not just today, but as we go forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.